Future Sense is a podcast edited from the radio show of the same name, broadcast on Bay FM in Byron Bay, Australia at bayfm.org. Hosted by Nick Jeans and well-known international futurist Steve McDonald, Future Sense provides a fresh, deep analysis of global trends and emergent technologies. How can we identify the layers of growth, personally, socially, and globally? What are the signs missed, the truths being denied? Science, history, politics, psychology, ancient civilizations, alien contact, the new psychedelic revolution, cryptocurrency and other disruptive and distributed technologies, and much more. This is Future Sense. Welcome to my co-host on Future Sense here, Steve McDonald. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, Nick. How are you doing this morning?
I'm good. I'm a little frazzled after this season. You know, it sort of throws you off, doesn't it? You don't know what day it is. Well, I don't know what day it is half the time.
It does a bit too, and we're in a national crisis here in Australia with massive fires, which I'm sure most people around the world are seeing on the news anyway. And we'll talk a little bit about that later in the show. But first up this morning, we've got a guest on the show, haven't we, Nick?
We have indeed. And we've been talking quite a lot in the last few weeks about the book, The Change Code, A Practical Guide to Making a Difference in a Polarized World. And that is, the author is Monica Bourgeau. We'll be talking to her from, I think, Portland in Oregon.
That's right.
In about 10, 15 minutes or so from now. It's a book that, as you may know if you listen to the show, that Steve here wrote the foreword for and is also quoted in there, here and there too. It's for leaders, visionaries and change makers. Those are the folks that we like to talk to here on this show, because there you are out there. Hello.
Hello. Indeed, and we've got a couple of books to give away to local listeners, so listen in and you might get a chance to grab a book.
In fact, you can actually call up pretty well anytime. Kate is out there already. She's familiar with the book. She has a copy out there she can look at herself at the moment. So you can, if you are a subscriber to Bay FM, then you can call up 66807 999. 66807 999 and go in the draw for a copy of The Change Code, which has been generously donated. A few copies. We have some, but we're just going to give away two today, given them by Monica. Thank you to her, and we'll be talking to her very soon. Yeah, fantastic. It's 2020, the first show of 2020 vision. They say hindsight is 2020 vision, but we need more than hindsight on this planet now.
We do, yeah. It's 2020 is shaping up to be a rather turbulent year, but I'm sure there'll also be some pretty amazing things that happen as well. I think it's going to be action-packed.
Action-packed, and we're going to be talking about action today, talking about agents of change. Many of you out there who listen to this show may well consider yourselves in some way or other to be agents for change. That's the most immediate thing that is a focus in your life at this time, to contribute to the change on this planet that is clearly needed in so many ways and in very complex ways. So we're going to be talking to you particularly today, and that's all of you out there, of course, because you're all change agents. You're tuned to Future Sense with Nick Jeans and Steve McDonald. Engage, emerge, activate, and spiral up. If you're tuned to Future Sense, it's 9:18 on Bay FM. If you're listening live here in the morning on the Northern Rivers of New South Wales in Australia, the east coast of Australia, we are on. If you're listening somewhere else, and certainly riddled with extremely horrendous fires and conditions in the south of the country, in the southeast of the country. And our thoughts and prayers go out to all of those people, all those folk out there, and all the firefighters, the RFS, and all the others who are battling those incredible blazes. And if you're listening somewhere else out there in the world via our podcast or via our website at bayfm.org, live streaming, you could be listening right now, or our podcast at futuresense.it. And I should also mention that we have, of course, our text line, which you can text at any time if you're local to us, 0437341119, 0437341119, if you have anything to add to, comment on, or bring our attention to. But we have on the line our special guest this morning, and great pleasure to welcome her from Portland in Oregon. Yeah.
Hello, Monica.
Hi, Steve and Nick.
Hello, Monica. Monica Bourgeau, she is the author of The Change Code, a practical guide to making a difference in a polarized world for leaders, visionaries and change makers, and with a foreword from our friend over here, Steve McDonald himself.
That's right, and what a time it is on this planet in terms of change, where we've got people protesting all over the world calling for change and desperately trying to make it happen. And how long ago was it, Monica, that you formed the idea to write a book about change?
Well, I actually really got serious about writing a book at the end of last year. So I started blogging back in 2011, and I wrote a blog post called 7 Ways to Change the World back in 2014, and it was on Huffington Post, so it got a really great response worldwide. And it really helped me see the value of a really simple but optimistic message. And so kind of since that time, I've thought about writing a book. And I got really serious at the end of last year.
When you say last year, was that 2018?
2018, yeah.
Wow, so you've knocked this book out and got it published in 12 months. That's a pretty amazing task, really.
Yeah, it was pretty intense.
Yeah, I can imagine. Is this the first book you've written?
It is the first book I've written.
Wow. And do you have a background in writing? Obviously, you've been blogging for a while.
Not really. I've been blogging for a while and have just been really interested in writing. And then I was interested in, writing something about how to create positive change. And then, of course, once I discovered Graves's whole theory, I just knew that, that needed to be the underlying framework for the book.
Right. And when was it that you came across Graves's work for the first time?
So I really believe that once we set a really clear intention and we step into that we can kind of co-create things with the universe. And writing this book was definitely a lesson in that for me. So I decided at the end of 2018 to write a book, and I knew it was going to be about how to create positive change, but I didn't know about Graves's theory or anything like that at that time. And then almost immediately after making that decision, I found this class locally, a 6-week class on spiral dynamics. And of course, I had no idea what that was at first, but once I heard the description, I thought, oh, that might be interesting. And then after one class, I was just completely blown away. And it really changed my life.
Wow, that's quite extraordinary. I actually thought you discovered Graves maybe a year earlier than that, but that's even sooner than I thought. And to be able to get your head around the model and then put it down on paper in that short space of time is quite extraordinary.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, Monica, this is Nick here. It made me a bit envious, actually, because the clarity of your perception and understanding of the model seems to be, almost transcendent. As you said, it's like the universe gifted you this opportunity to reach into this material and inform the book that you wanted to write anyway without actually knowing how that was going to unfold. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. In all honesty, I kind of became obsessed with the theory. Like as soon as I learned about it, it just gave me so much hope and comfort that what we're going through right now, kind of the chaos and all the turmoil that I see around me, is part of a normal change process. And I also saw that there could be a lot of really practical applications for the theory. So I just was determined to learn absolutely everything I could about the theory. So I started reading and researching and, pretty much all of my free time. And of course, that's how I came across Steve and the Future Sense podcast as well.
Cool. And at what stage did you reach out to Dr. Don Beck, who, of course, is one of the co-authors of the Spiral Dynamics book?
So I didn't actually reach out to Dr. Beck until kind of maybe mid-year, and it just so happened that I had a business trip in Dallas, Texas, which is not too far from his home in Denton. And so I had sent him a couple of emails and he hadn't really responded, but he responded while I was in Dallas and said, I'd be happy to meet with you, and here's my address. And so I made the trek up to Denton to meet with him in person, and it was pretty amazing. He was incredibly kind and gracious, and he had all of these materials just meticulously laid out across his living room, and kind of took me on a tour of Graves's work and his work as well. So it was very meaningful and incredibly educational.
Well, that's wonderful. And as you know, I trained with Don back in 2005, a couple of years after I discovered Graves's work also, through the Spiral Dynamics book. And Don must be getting on in age now. Do you know how old he is exactly?
I know he's in his 80s, and he actually just had his birthday at the end of December. So he's had kind of a rough go of it. He's had some health issues the past couple of years, and he lost his wife just over a year ago. So he hasn't been very public. So for him to kind of let me in a little bit was incredibly gracious, and I'm very grateful.
I was fascinated to read, Monica, about his work with Nelson Mandela, and as I also studied Graves' work, I was familiar with Don Beck's influence on Nelson Mandela, but I didn't realise how foundational in some senses it was to the work that he did as once he got out of jail and became the president of South Africa. Can you just expand on that a little bit?
Sure. There's actually a book that Dr. Beck wrote about the topic in a lot more detail, but it's called The Crucible. And Dr. Beck had made several promises to Claire W. Graves when he was kind of going out on his own. And it was really to start applying Graves's theory to real world challenges. And one of those was to try to make a positive impact in South Africa. And so he reached out to Nelson Mandela and his team there in South Africa and offered to be of assistance. And so they did take him up on that, and he was able to make 67 trips to South Africa. And one of the things that was really impressive to me is that Dr. Beck was a full professor at a college in Texas, and he actually gave that up and funded a lot of the trips himself through his retirement accounts and some various consulting projects and that sort of thing. But he was really committed to proving that Graves's theory was more than just a theory, that there were really practical ways that you could apply it to some of the hottest tension places in the world.
Yeah, that's right. It no doubt changed Don's life as well, because, as you said, he was a professor of history and basically gave up his career and just devoted the rest of his life to working with Graves and educating people about his model and applying the model also in the world. Yeah, that's fantastic. Monica, we might just take a short break and we'll come back for some more.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us. Monica Bourgeau, she is the author of the Change Code new book, and we have 2 copies generously donated by her today. We've got some others, but today we're giving away 2. If you are a subscriber to BayFM 66807 give Kate a call. She's out there. She'll take your details down there, and we'll run the draw for as long as we're talking to Monica today, and then draw those 2 books, gifts from her. The Change Code, a practical guide to making a difference in a polarized world. And the polarization is something I'm sure we'll be talking about quite a lot shortly. We'll be back.
For all of you out there, strangers in a strange land, you're grokking Future Sense here on Bay FM.
You're tuned to Bay FM, and it is 9:34 here on Future Sense with Steve McDonald and myself, Nick Jeans. And quickly before we go back to talking to Monica Bourgeau, a couple of texts have come in that are relevant. Thank you. 0437341119 if you want to text in. And first listener says, there have been times in the past I've barely been able to be an agent for changing my underpants, let alone anything greater. Thanks, Nick and Steve, for helping fuel my inspiration to tap into flow and commit to being a part of a movement for big picture change. Cheers, Jack in Brisbane. Hey, Jack. Thanks for joining us from Brisbane. Jack. And secondly, second text from someone else. Hey, guys, I read her book already. Whoa. I read her book. It's awesome. It sounds like a lot of the content came from this show, and in particular Steve's analogies and metaphors. Very inspiring. I would love to become one of the change agents she writes about. Lovely. Thank
Wonderful.
you.
Did you hear that, Monica?
That's awesome. I'm so glad that you enjoyed the book. Thank you for the feedback.
Cool. Very good.
And I thought we might just talk for a moment, Monica, about your career background, just to get a sense of what shaped your understanding of change, the kind of work that you've done in the past. Do you want to give us a little summary?
Sure, you bet. So I actually grew up in a really rural town in Montana, but I went on to get a degree in psychology and a master's degree in management with an emphasis on organizational leadership. And that's really where I started learning about complex systems and complex system design. And then as far as a career, for the past about 2 decades, I've been working in healthcare transformation with rural hospitals across the United States, as well as with health insurance companies. And our goal has really been to do system transformation and payment reform. But kind of 2 of the coolest things I've done in my career were creating hackathon events, and I partnered with MIT to create hacking medicine events. And so that type of innovation and just exciting energy of change has just been something that I've always really been drawn to. And then I've also spent almost 20 years studying personal transformation and spirituality and all of those sorts of things. And then I, of course, discovered Graves. And I'm definitely still learning about all of this, which is so much fun.
That's cool. Tell us just briefly about the hackathon events. I take it they were kind of live events, like face-to-face events where people were trying to innovate on the spot. Is that a fair description?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was in healthcare transformation, it was really frustrating to try to create change in the American healthcare system. And so I always looked a lot to entrepreneurs and designers and people with different perspectives. And so I thought, wouldn't it be fun to bring together rural hospital executives with some of these other perspectives to brainstorm and come up with completely out of the box and new solutions. And so that's the kind of thing that we did at the hackathon events. And fortunately, I was able to partner with MIT and their hacking medicine program to lead those events. So they already had kind of a proven model and framework. And we came up with some really cool things that have actually been implemented. So that was a lot of fun.
That's very cool. And when it came to conceptualizing the Change Code book, what was the scope of your thinking in terms of creating change? Like, clearly you were working within a health system, and I guess on a sort of a national scale, perhaps thinking about upgrading, changing the health system. And when you came to conceptualize the book, were you thinking on a kind of national scale, or were you really thinking global?
I was definitely thinking global, but, certainly in the United States as well, and really understanding the importance of creating new systems that would support change, because I see kind of every day in my work about how systems can keep the right thing from happening, both with patients and just in our day-to-day lives. And so I really wanted to be part of that. And the goal really was just to inspire people to take action and to start working toward positive change, because I just felt like a lot of people were feeling kind of like I was before I discovered Graves's model, that they were really frustrated and almost kind of getting paralyzed by the negative headlines that were in the media. And so I felt like it was really important to share this model with those people that are out there that really are pathfinders, and, they're out there creating change already, and just to let them know, keep doing that, and we need you now more than ever, and to give them some real tools to do that.
That's great. And as well as Graves's material, you've also got a lot of good content in the book around the issue of polarization and dealing constructively with polarization. And what was the origin of that? When did you first come across that material?
So, that was kind of new material for me. I hadn't worked a lot with political types of topics or polarization, but I felt like that was a major obstacle, because I could see these, major problems like climate change and immigration and even the healthcare system. And it was frustrating to me that we weren't able to communicate and come together to work towards solutions. And so I identified polarization as a major factor in all of that, and felt like really to make progress, we needed to somehow be able to tackle some of the polarization that we're seeing.
And so you've got some really good practical model kind of material in the book there to guide people on how to think about polarization and how to approach solutions, right?
Yes. So one of my favorite tools that I share in the book is a tool that was developed by Dr. Barry Johnson, and it's called polarity mapping and polarity management, because there's pretty much polarities in everything we do, and good leaders really learn how to identify those polarities and manage to them, rather than the whole pendulum going too far one way or too far the other way. So for example, just the decision that a company or an organization or an individual would make, if they should change or stay the same, that's an example of a polarity. And so you can look at the pros of changing, you can look at the cons of changing, you can look at the pros for staying the same, and the cons for making too much change, and really start to balance those polarities. And that's how you get really good leadership. And so that was a really helpful tool that I discovered in this process that I've already started using in my workshops and in my own organization to help drive change more easily, and also to do it in a way that really looks at all perspectives to create better solutions.
That's fantastic. And I think I might have shared with you that I had a meeting with our Governor General here in Australia a few weeks ago, and who is officially our head of state, because we're still a part of the British Commonwealth. And the meeting was really about healthcare. It was about talking about research in psychedelic medicine and the progress that had happened, particularly in the US, and what we might need to do here in order to catch up. But at the end of that discussion, he just said, "Oh, well, so what are you doing with yourself these days?" And so I've been speaking to him about spiral dynamics at Army reunions over the years, and he was aware of that. And I said to him, "You remember that stuff?" And he said, "Yeah, I remember that." And we had a good little conversation about all the change going on at the moment, and he actually suggested to me that there was some kind of paradigm shift going on, based on discussions that he'd had with some of the people in Canberra, which is our national capital. And so I'm going to send him a copy of the book pretty soon, so that'll be on the Governor General's desk here in Australia.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you.
Very good. You identifying polarization, I think it's something we talk about quite a lot here on this show, and we talk about it particularly in the frame of Claire W. Graves' work in regards to the regressive search that at this time of crisis when we are on the edge, as you say, I think later in the book, just to quote you, you say, "We're stuck in the middle of two worlds. The chaotic current day reality of society on the one hand and our own personal microcosm on the other. It's like we have one foot on the dock and another on the boat, and the boat's beginning to drift away. We know we're supposed to do something, to do more, and there must be a better way. We're just not sure what that looks like." And I think that's a description, I think, of many people that we certainly know in this region here of relatively aware people, you could argue, really looking for how to make that bridge between where we are and where we're starting to vision where we need to go. And against that is this force of excessive polarization and tribalism that is sort of overtaking the world. So it is actually a natural process. Can you speak to that a little bit, please?
Sure, yeah. I love that quote that you just shared, Nick. Thank you. And it actually kind of comes from my healthcare background. We talk a lot about the shaky bridge because we're trying to transition our healthcare system in the United States from a volume-based system where doctors get paid based on the number of times they see a patient to the value-based system where it's really based on more positive outcomes and keeping the patient healthy. And so I think of that, one foot on the dock and one foot on the boat kind of a scenario a lot with change. And that's where I think polarity mapping becomes really helpful, because you need to make that change. But also if you go too quickly and change everything, you're setting yourself up for failure. And so it's good to look at kind of both sides of an issue and have multiple perspectives so that you can understand all of the different components that are going to be affected by just making one small change. Yes. And so, really being informed about that.
I think one of the things that really both made absolute sense, but also challenged me a little bit, was the notion that you bring forward to change agency on the planet at this time, which is what your book is addressing, the change agents that many of us seek to be, is the notion that we're going to have to be satisfied with solutions that are good enough going forward. I think this is key, and it sort of speaks to that complexity which you just mentioned there. There are so many factors, so many levers. When you move one thing, another thing moves. I think that's maybe one of the hardest things for many people to come to, is maybe there isn't some silver bullet anywhere. There is actually strategies we need to move forward that incorporate all of this, but are the best we can do in any given moment in time.
For sure. And that was actually a really big epiphany for me in writing the book, is coming to that conclusion, because I'm definitely a problem solver and I want to get in and just, fix some of these big problems. And I realized that that's just not going to be the case. And so it's getting comfortable with that good enough for now solution and just moving forward kind of bit by bit, and also bringing people with you, because I think, that's one of the challenges we're seeing in the United States right now is, half the people feel one way and half the people feel the other way. And as long as you have that incredible divide, you're not moving forward at all. So, doing things in a way that you're going to move at least the masses together is going to be really helpful.
Mm.
Yeah, I think because we're in this in-between space after the sort of height of the scientific industrial era and in the early stage emergence of what's next, it's perhaps one of the most difficult times, throughout the whole change cycle to try and have to deal with that polarity, because there's just so much of it around and it's growing right now.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And that of course is where Graves's work comes in and really shows its value, is that we can understand all sides of the all perspectives rather in the polarity situation, and even the different layers. I mean, I guess when we talk about polarity, by definition we normally mean this or that, two choices, but Graves kind of teases it out a bit further so we can see more detail on either side of the fence.
Absolutely, and I think the example you use a lot, Steve, is really appropriate about not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because there is value in some of those earlier layers that we need to tap into in order to be successful in solving the bigger problems that we face.
Yeah, absolutely.
Seems to be the key, really, is how to bring everybody with you, as said, transcend but include, and to find the set and setting for each individual in their expression from their value system to have value in a new world, in a solution-based world going forward. That's really quite a strong challenge, just that, I think, for many of us.
For sure. And I think especially those of us that are change agents and that like to kind of drive change, I can always see the benefits of creating change, but it's actually a really good exercise for me to look back at, what are the benefits of staying the same and the way things have been done before, and how can we start to mesh some of those benefits with the benefits of change in order to make transitions more smoothly.
Yeah, and that's part of the value in the regressive values search. It's easy to look at that regression as a negative, but it also includes the positive aspect of looking back to previous eras when we've lived communally, for example, and remembering how we did that, and also understanding in that process that we're not going back to that, but we're learning from it in order to create something new, something more complex and capable.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
We'll take another little break here, Monica. We're talking to Monica Bourgeau, the author of The Change Code.
You're resonating right now on Future Sense with Steve McDonald and Nick Jeans.
It's 9:54 here on Bay FM on Future Sense with myself, Nick Jeans, and Steve McDonald. Through till 11 o'clock this morning, we're talking today to the author of The Change Code, Monica Bourgeau. She is in Portland in Oregon, and it is the practical guide to making a difference in a polarized world. And the term that's used, that she uses often in the book, is agents for change. It is a book that is speaking to agents for change. If you identify yourself in some way as that, I know many people do, in the various fields, in the work that you do, in the volunteer activity that you do, in the environmental work that you do, in the social justice work you do, in other areas of life. And if you identify yourself as an agent of change in some form or other, then this is a book that's going to definitely give you a lot of really fantastic tools. And you can win a copy of the book, of Monica's book. We have two. If you are a subscriber to Bay FM, 66807 give us a call and go in the draw. Yes.
Yes, indeed. And it's a very digestible book. It's very easy to read.
Indeed.
And it's very clear, and it's full of wonderful tools and guides. I mentioned to you before, Monica, that I thought about writing a book a few years back on Graves's work, and I saw the need for something fresh and something that really spoke to this time in history, because the Spiral Dynamics book, of course, was published back in the 90s. And there have been a couple of other books put out there, but I think yours really takes the prize in terms of the brief yet informative nature of it, and the way that you can just pick it up and digest things really easy, and it's really a wonderful manual for change agents, who want to take action.
Thank you. One of my goals in writing the book was to create something that was really accessible, because, while I enjoy a lot of the other books on spiral dynamics, they are a little bit dense sometimes, and I felt like we needed more of an entry-level really accessible type of book for change agents.
Yeah, exactly. And I ran into that trouble back about 10 years ago when I was teaching spiral dynamics in the corporate world. The book, a wonderful book and life-changing book that it is, it was full of jargon which really just didn't translate well, particularly to our culture here in Australia. And I very, very quickly realised that I needed to change the language and change the way that I presented it to make it work a bit better. Particularly, in the context of like a 2-day course or something like that. Let's just quickly skip through the content of the book and get you to speak a little to that. So I guess you open up with the chapter heading, "Why Can't We Be Friends?" and then how change really happens. Just talk to that briefly.
Sure. So the first chapter, Why Can't We Be Friends, is really about polarization and why we're so polarized. And some of the really interesting kind of discoveries that I had in writing the book and that I talk about are that as individuals, we're not really as polarized as we think. But unfortunately, we're kind of caught up in this exaggerated cycle of polarization because our politicians have become much more polarized than before. And some of that is due to funding. That's where the political funding goes, is more to the extremes are the ones that are funding a lot of the campaigns. And then when you add to that the media and the sensationalism and social media and just the negative confirmation bias, when we see something from the other side, we take it as a negative. And all of those things have kind of created this polarizing environment.
Yeah, that's really in our face here at the moment with the fire crisis and the political response, which has been less than adequate in the eyes of most Australians. And what's becoming really, really obvious is these underlying agendas, which in day-to-day politics are certainly there, but they're not so critical because we're not looking to our politicians to take important and immediate actions for the good of the greater community. They're just kind of doing the background admin, as it were, for the country. But one of the things that happened just in the last couple of days here in Australia was, I guess most people in the world who have been watching the news about Australia probably might know that our Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, went on holidays around the time that the fire crisis was really just starting to ramp up. And a lot of people saw that as being a bit disconnected and inappropriate. And then when he came, he did actually cut his holiday short and came back to Australia to kind of pay attention to what was going on here. And one of his very recent actions was to produce a party political advertisement to put on the television to talk up how good his response has been, I guess in part to try and compensate for the fact that he was under a lot of criticism for not being in the country. And it's just really not gone down very well at all. As you can imagine, people are wanting a leader to focus on what needs to be done and the greater good. And here he is essentially focusing on his own image and trying to pump up his own image through advertisement. And I think that's a great example. And it's all tied in with, as you say, this what I call corporate capture, where our political system has grown into something that really relies on sponsors, financial sponsors, and often the agendas that are pushed by our leaders are those agendas rather than for the community itself. And I'm sure you sort of identify with that in terms of what's happening in the US as well, right?
Absolutely. And that was one of the things that I discovered in writing the book as well, is that most people in the United States, I can't speak to Australia as much, but they feel like they don't have representative politicians really working for us. And I think that's just about a consensus across the board. In fact, there was a survey that I cited in the book created by hiddentribes.us that surveyed many thousands of people. And what they found are that most people fall in the frustrated middle of the political system. They're not far right and they're not far left, but of course our politicians are not in the middle. And so there's a great deal of frustration with the political system in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And how change really happens. Tell us about that part of the book.
Yeah, so I definitely built a lot off of your kind of model for change, based on Graves's work with how change happens and going through the different stages of change and talking about the regressive value search that you guys talk a lot about on the podcast. And I feel like we are definitely seeing a lot of that right now with the slogans like Make America Great Again and those types of things, where we're wanting to go back to a simpler time to try to ease some of the tension and the chaos that we're feeling. But unfortunately, it's really not working. And I think we're seeing that very clearly in the United States right now.
Yeah, we are too here.
You talk a lot about this, and I'll just go back because it seems appropriate to the book, David Brooks's book, The Second Mountain, which you refer to, and his 4 interrelated social crises. And the last one being the tribalism crisis, but this is referring to the excessive individualism that is upon the land, and for those who understand Graves' work to some degree, this is sort of a main characteristic of, and particularly in the end time, so to speak, of the orange or the 5th layer of Graves' work. Yes, end times, and choose my words carefully here. That there's excessive individualism, which can lead to excessive tribalism. And you say there that those who are feeling disconnected look for a way to return to the bonds of community. But unfortunately, tribalism provides the dark side of community. Instead of community based on mutual affection, tribalism provides connection based on mutual hatred. Now, that's a strong statement, but it is clearly, for most people, it's very hard to argue that now, that our polarity, our individualism has led to this excessive tribalism, and mostly this is based on not a good feeling, an empathic feeling to others, but actually on a disgust or a distaste for others.
Yeah, that was an interesting element too in the research, is just finding that we view people from the other party as being far worse than they actually are. Yeah. And there's these perceptions out there. And then, with social media and those types of things, they reinforce those negative concepts. But the Second Mountain book that you referenced, Nick, was actually a really interesting read for me, especially at this time, because I felt like it just so clearly kind of portrayed, especially David Brooks's own individual experience of moving from orange to green, where he talks about moving from the first mountain to the second mountain. And the first mountain is, of course, climbing the corporate ladder and working really hard because you need to earn so much money and prestige and cars and all of those sorts of things. And then once you get there, you realize, is that all there is? And you feel the need for something more. And so it's kind of his process through that change of realizing that, that's not really enough anymore, and looking for a greater meaning through service and, the greater good, and that transitional process that he went through.
That's fantastic, and it's very good for listeners to hear that, because I think there are so many people clearly in one crisis or another at the moment, individually, with respect to what is going on the planet in all ways. Let's just look quickly, maybe a comment on the other 3 crises that David Brooks identifies in his book, The Second Mountain. The first one being the loneliness crisis. We talk about this quite a lot on this show. That more than 35% of Americans, I'm sure these figures are pretty accurate for Australia too, 35% of Americans over 45 are chronically lonely, and we've stopped talking to our neighbours. Only 8% of Americans report having important conversations with their neighbours in a given year. The psychological, social and moral toll caused by this detachment is horrific. Since 1999, the US suicide rate has risen by 30% to roughly 45,000. I do believe that last year, 2019, was the largest number of suicides in the US ever. And also opioids kill another 72,000. So those statistics really point to something in this loneliness crisis, don't they?
They sure do. And boy, I see that every day firsthand, just working in the healthcare system, of the opioid epidemic and how that's hitting communities across the country, especially the rural communities that I work a lot with, their hospital systems. They've been hit especially hard by opioids and suicides and all of those types of things as well. So definitely see that kind of every day in the healthcare world.
Yes, indeed. And the second crisis that he identifies is the distrust crisis. Our culture has moved into a permanent state of distrust. It seems like everyone is just out for themselves, and they are. Distrust breeds distrust. When people feel distrustful, they conclude that the only person that they can rely on is themselves. So this is actually a very strong figure. And we're seeing this very strongly in this country, as much, I think, as you are in the United States now.
Yeah, and I think that, carries over to the media as well. We no longer trust the media and the headlines. And so we've kind of lost, unfortunately, that common set of facts that we all agree upon. We used to have just a limited number of newspapers and TV reports, but the benefit of that is that everybody was kind of operating from the same types of facts. And now we have all of these different versions of the exact same story. And so it can be really hard to discern which one is accurate and which one to believe. And so I think that's just creating more and more distrust just in general.
And I guess it leads to the fourth crisis that David Brooks identifies, which is the meaning crisis, that there's a pervasive lack of meaning in our society, and related mental health problems such as depression and suicide are seeing a significant increase. And it's pretty clear. If you can't trust anybody, if you're feeling alone and you can't trust what's going on in the world, then it's very hard to find a strong sense of meaning in yourself, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And that's something I hear a lot, still kind of working in the corporate environment, is just a lot of people feeling like, is this all there is? And feeling like they're meant to do more and make more of a difference, but they're maybe not sure where to get started or what to do. And so I think that there's a high level of desire to want to make things better, but really not knowing where to start and wanting to create that additional meaning, but not knowing where to start.
Indeed.
And part of that challenge is because we are transiting between value systems, and not everybody, of course, is moving between layers 5 and 6 in Graves's model, which is the sort of scientific industrial paradigm, to the relativistic postmodern. Other people, depending on their life conditions, are transiting between different value systems, and so we've got multiple layers of change. And when we're in between that space, from as we move from one value system to another, we have to let go of our old values. It's like our anchor points come loose and float a little while, and that can be a very scary place to be, where we're not quite sure what our values are. And I think that's where the Change Code book is going to be really useful for people to just read about the value systems, and straight away they'll be able to identify which one of those they feel that they're moving to at the time. And I think that's going to be really, really useful, because it will help people start to put down new anchors and really settle on, okay, yeah, that's what I'm feeling.
Yeah, and that's been interesting. That's definitely been a lot of the responses that I've been getting back from the book so far, from people who read it and just from people around me, is just almost a surprise that this theory was out there and that it is so descriptive of what's happening right now and the experience that they're feeling. And so I think it provides a lot of reassurance to know that, this is happening, these are the different layers, and that it's normal to move between these, and that some of the chaos and tension that we're experiencing, both as a society and as individuals, is really a normal part of the development process. I think that was really reassuring to me, and that's what I'm hearing from others as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And this model really represents the kind of quantum mechanics of psychology. And I don't want to scare anybody off by saying that, but it really is. It's teasing out the background detail in understanding human nature and psychology, which really just hasn't leaked into the mainstream yet. But now is the time for that to happen.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I just want to say, actually, on that point too, with regards to the model, and many listeners to this show and to the podcast are getting pretty familiar with Claire W. Grace's model. But if not, I think one of the important things that your book also shows is the model is an overarching model. It is a quantum model, but you incorporate and you mention a number of other pieces of good work, of tools that you use that can be used. So it's not that the model is the only thing. It's the model can, of course, encompass really good work that represents and reflects the movement between value systems where necessary, and I think that's really important for people to understand that this is not some sort of this is the answer kind of thing. It is a structure which shows and reflects and mirrors the actual process which human beings actually do go through.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a really helpful framework for understanding the different layers that we move between and understanding where we've been as a society and as individuals, but also to kind of give us some hope about what's possible, because I think a lot of us who are optimists kind of believe that, we're able to create greater things as a society, but this really gives us kind of a hard and fast framework to show us what really is possible, with moving into second tier and those next layers that we're getting close to.
Wonderful. We'll take another break, and perhaps we'll have another session, or even two. We'll see how we go with you, and we might look at those second tier examples and possibilities, and things to look at, the value systems and the what we can identify as second tier as it's moving forward. You're on Bay FM. You are tuned to Future Sense here with Nick Jeans and Stephen McDonald. Thanks for the other text. Someone's written and said the trouble with America is it got to the top of Everest and found nothing there. That's one way of looking at it. All right, we'll be back soon. Thank you.
You've been listening to Future Sense, a podcast edited from the radio show of the same name, broadcast on Bay FM in Byron Bay, Australia, at bayfm.org. Future Sense is available on iTunes and SoundCloud. The future is here now. It's just not evenly distributed.